The list of costliest hurricanes in U.S. history is dominated by storms from the last 15 years. Of the costliest dozen hurricanes, only 2 occurred before 2004. Andrew in 1992 is number 5 on the list, while the storm at number 12 made landfall in South Carolina 30 years ago this week and was historic in many ways. Now I'm talking about Hugo, which like many September hurricanes originated as a disturbance that moved west off Africa. It became a tropical storm and was named on September 11th, 1989, strengthened to a hurricane 2 days later. Hugo reached its peak intensity on September 15th, well east of the northern Leeward Islands. The first hurricane hunter plane to investigate the storm at that time expected only about 100-mile-per-hour winds based on satellite estimates, but instead found Category 5 conditions, 160-mile-per-hour winds, and extreme turbulence. The plane even lost an engine and had to dump 15,000 pounds of fuel just to safely get out of the eye. 2 days later, Hugo slammed into the islands of Guadeloupe and Montserrat with 140-mile-per-hour winds, and the eye passed right over St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, causing the worst devastation in that island's history, even worse than Maria in 2017. More than 90% of the island's buildings were damaged or destroyed by Hugo, leaving 45,000 people homeless and leading to widespread civil unrest. President Bush sent more than 1,000 military police to the island to restore order. Hugo next skirted the eastern end of Puerto Rico, then turned northwest and headed toward the southeast U.S., making landfall just north of Charleston in the wee hours of September 22nd, with nearly 140-mile-per-hour sustained winds. With $7 billion in damage in South Carolina alone, Hugo was the strongest hurricane to hit the U.S. in the 1980s and one of the first big tests for FEMA, which was established a decade earlier. The response was very slow in South Carolina, leading to reforms that were tested next in Andrew, the next catastrophic hurricane to strike the U.S. 3 years later. Hugo still packed hurricane force winds 200 miles inland when it reached Charlotte, North Carolina, where 80,000 trees were knocked down and 98% of the residents lost power. Hugo soon was downgraded to a tropical storm as it raced north through West Virginia, eastern Ohio, and across Lake Erie, and became extratropical. Historically, Hugo was a landmark storm for television coverage of hurricanes, especially for the Weather Channel, which at the time had only been on the air 7 years. Their round-the-clock coverage, led by then hurricane expert John Hope, established the network as a force on the cable dial. Despite being a large and powerful hurricane, Hugo moved so fast that inland rainfall totals were relatively small. Parts of the southern Appalachians got more than 5 inches, but most locations in western Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh and Erie, got just 1 to 2 inches of rain. Stay tuned. Our extended forecast is next.